With Vans Without Borders, a humanitarian aid team who delivers essential aid and supplies to struggling civilian communities on the front line. And in our team, we have
Henry, Louis, Jan, Kieran.
We also have Justin Ukraine Aid, who we partner up with, a great guy who helps sponsor some of the aid we deliver. And a huge thanks to Brian and Matt for helping us drive over this trip. When we visited a unit in Zaporizhzhia Oblast, they wanted to show us some of their training as a way of saying thank you for the supplies we dropped off to them. It's one of the few areas we were actually denied entry to deliver aid because it was simply too dangerous, and it's only the military can go and reach and support the people who remain in the villages around there. So the guys showed us some of the weapons which they'd actually captured from the Russians and how they work, so we could get a bit more of a sense of what they have to experience and put up with when they are on the offensive. While we were there, it was a very real experience. Obviously what we saw was just training, but there was the really real booms and the explosions in the background from the Ukrainian offensive in Zaporizhzhia. We were about 40 kilometers from the front, but it was still very, very real. The reality of war was there. And actually, as we were driving back, we saw in the horizon, it was smoke. Everything was on fire where the Russians had just shelled a village. When we go out with the army and when we help the army, and even when we went to the shooting range, we have to turn our phones off, because the reality is the Russians can track the Ukrainian soldiers and the Ukrainians can track Russians. And we've had friends who've told us they've literally sat in command headquarters where they're watching people, tracking them via Signal, via WhatsApp, which is meant to be end-to-end encrypted, but it's not, because it still uses your location. And even when you turn location services off, it is still transmitting. They use this to spot clusters of phones, and they assume there's a lot of people there, and that's where they tend to send rockets on both sides.
You said you got hit there. Really?
They quite like to kill humanitarian workers and foreigners because it's a big morale blow to the Ukrainian side and the international pro-Ukrainian lobby. One of the problems you have when you are putting your things in plane mode or turning it off, or your GPS gets scrambled, is you don't actually know where you are and where you're heading, especially if you've got Ukrainians driving you, because a lot of them don't really speak English, and we're not always in a vehicle with a translator, and you ask them where we're going and they say, this way, no problem. You could be driving right to the front line, and we've been driven to the front before, and you only know when you start seeing landmines and no people around at all. And other times you could be going somewhere quite safe, so you're always ready to go and react if something does happen. As Forrest Gump said, life's like a box of chocolates, you never know what you're going to get. So we're on our way to Zaporizhzhia to bring some aid to the villages out there, and also meet a military unit who patrol the area and fix some vehicles. Valerie's forced us to travel down here to Zaporizhzhia despite it being an active area, but there we go, all in a day's work. Part of this trip we wanted to bring out Valerie from the Telegraph. Valerie has been working with us since we were first in Ukraine and helped us with our fundraising through getting our work in the media and broadcasting it to the world. A lot of what we do as well with Valerie's help is actually show the reality of war. No one else is doing this. What we do is actually very unique, and it is a huge morale booster to the people in Ukraine, and it helps keep interest in the West with a dwindling news focus. And I'm very grateful to the Telegraph and to Valerie and the team for helping us keep the message out there and keep people interested in Ukraine. For Valerie, we wanted to make sure she was safe. We made sure she had the best armour, so the team actually put together a decent kit for her, best body armour, Kevlar, decent helmet, and made sure she was comfortable, knew how to put it on. And fair play to Valerie, she was very brave, and she came with us right into Zaporizhzhia, and pretty much right as close as possible to the front line there.
Spot on. She can go to South London now.
How are you feeling, Valerie?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually surprisingly light.
It is effective. We thought it was important for Valerie to come out with us to see the reality. We wanted her to experience it. It's one thing watching it on camera, the smells, the noises, the fear, the adrenaline which kicks in. It changes your perspective and it helps you better understand the struggle of the Ukrainian people. So showing us at this base where they've been hit by a cluster bomb. This war is very different to every other war. It's not like the movies. There's no big encampments of troops because it's simply too big a target in the sort of new age of technological warfare. And they are very rustic. They don't have fineries. There's no running water. Probably don't have electricity unless you have a generator. Some bases you'll stay at and they have rat problems, and there's nothing the soldiers can really do about that because they're simply too tired to rat trap the area or catch the pests, and so they have to live in very poor conditions. And it's simply the bravery and the patriotism of the soldiers which gets them through this. For us, it's a horrible experience for an evening, but for these guys, they see it as their duty, and they're willing to undergo these pretty abhorrent living standards to defend their country.
It's just quite a little Aladdin's cave, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
What I love about Ukraine are the similarities between the soldiers and guys back home in Britain. You know, a lot of these guys, like us, are just big kids, and every time we go to a military base, they love to show us their weapons, their guns.
Это такой у нас тренинг.
Oh, yeah. Training nades. Training.
Shrapnel.
Inside. Shrapnel. So you're making IEDs.
For
And then you wrap round them so when you drop them, they kill more people.
Это сдалённо. Тоже.
Так, сейчас Саш покажу.
The Ukrainians operate on quite a shoestring budget, and it's down to a lot of the guys at the front to improvise their own sort of munitions. So we see all sorts of interesting things which have been used with drones, RPGs which have been modified in certain ways, and all new types of explosives which are very innovative.
That's not personnel. Oh, wow.
It's a fascinating and very different war to anything that's been fought before.
Я думаю, что это знаешь что.
Ah, British Mark It's funny, we find those everywhere. Well, we see those all over Ukraine.
British elephant, best friend of the Ukrainian elephant.
So something the soldier told us was that the Russians have been kidnapping children, toddlers, 5-year-olds, very young kids, bringing them into Russia and brainwashing them, programming them to be the next Russian soldiers of the future. They're raising them with a deep hatred of Ukraine, and they will use them on the front lines to fight their countrymen. The Russians have fought this war, well, evilly, but in terms of military tactics, they have been smart in the sense they haven't used a lot of ethnic Russians in this conflict. They've used other people because they're not fussed about other people. They don't care if they die. They like to use Ukrainians instead of ethnic Russians because they don't view them as equals. They view them as a sub-people, and they want to wipe them off the face of the earth.
Написана история была после войны, да, и уже 21 век. Она имеет свойство повторяться, цикличность, как спираль. То бишь немцы, чтобы увеличить свое количество населения, брали маленьких детей, там, грубо говоря, там, от новорожденных и до 8 лет. То есть такие как раз. Сама история повторяется. Русские приехали, и у нас дома, где я сам родом, интернат. То есть дети, у которых нет родителей. Вырастает. Представьте, что происходит у ребенка в голове. То есть у него нет родителей, у него нет никого, и вот тут вот этот информационный вот это самый негативный эффект, что происходит. Эти дети начинают ненавидеть свою, как бы в какой-то степени себя, и начинают ненавидеть то место, где они были рождены.
When you deal with countries like Russia, they don't think in terms of elections every 4 years like we do in the West. They think of 10, 15 years down the line. So when they're kidnapping kids and programming them to be the soldiers of the future, they're thinking in 15 years these will be the people we use against the Ukrainians.
Рашисты есть фашисты. Вот такое же самое. То есть их воспитывают в милитаре. То есть он уже с рождения стрелять, бросать гранату, окапываться, то есть у детей забирают их самое дорогое, как и у меня, и у вас, детство.
This is how the Ukrainians transport ammunition to the front line. On top of a larder. Love it.
Sumy was an interesting experience.
So he just told us not to go down there, left or right, we'll get shot. So no to do that.
We've been there once before and we were keen to go back because we help a village where there's lots of older people there. There was a young community before the war, but they all evacuated, and you have a case where there's lots of older residents remain. Some of them are too stubborn to leave, partly because it's their home, partly because they don't know what life's like outside of their village. They've live off the land, and they operate in communities without money. It's a bartering community really, and they don't understand city life or life away from home. Probably some of them have never left the region either. We were keen to go back. We got told by people, don't go to Sumy, it's too dangerous. We will go anywhere. We're not worried about the risks of helping people. At the end of the day, why are our lives any more important than the Ukrainian people? And if we can bring them food and supplies and help ease their burden, everyone on my team is happy to do that. But when we went into Sumy, we were going into the place we were staying, and almost immediately as we got out the car, and then a massive rocket came in and exploded and leveled a tower block. So we just pulled up in Sumy, a massive rocket just came in, and boom, sirens going off. Not good at all. It was a bit of a reality check for our team, for the new guys who hadn't experienced anything like that, but also it was important for our team to see this horrific atrocity, because it puts everything back in perspective. It's extremely dangerous what we're doing, and we need to bear that in mind when we go places. So we're delivering these care packages right to Mezanivka, which is pretty much on the Russian border. Most of the young people have left this village, and it is only older people who remain. Lots of them are immobile. We were last there in September, and it was quite upsetting, but we gave them quite a lot of food, and we're returning with more care packages for them. We've also got clothing from the UK, sanitary products, all sorts of different bits for them. So I hope, and I think they'll really appreciate it. So currently we're on the road to Metanovka. Russia is literally about 20 kilometers that way. Roads are terrible. Apparently they can hit you with tank shells here, so we've got to be extra careful. Everyone's got their armour on. So yeah, but there's still a village of about 200 people, older people who are stuck here, either don't want to leave because it's all they've known their whole lives, or they've been abandoned by their families. So we're going to be going and bringing them a little bit of food and supplies. So seeing what's happening here is normally people take big bundles of clothes and leave, but what they're doing is sharing them out amongst themselves. No problem. We're just on our way back to Kyiv after a very successful trip to the front. Last April, when I was in Ukraine, we linked up with Artem and his charity Law for People. They were our first port of call in Kyiv, and we gave them some supplies thinking, yeah, we've helped, and they said, no, come out with us, help us distribute it. So Artem really taught us how to distribute aid in Ukraine, how to do it effectively, how to beep horns when you're in certain areas to attract people and show that you're a friendly individual and not a invading force. And they were a group which got us into Bucha and Irpin a few days after they drove all the Russians out, so they're very well respected in Ukraine.
I met Jack Ross in Kiev, and as I remember, it was April 2022, and Russian armed forces just leave this region, and people left without any food, without anything. And it was my first idea to organize volunteer network around these situations. I called to my friends, I called to members of my organizations, then I met Jack, and together we supplied a lot of humanitarian to this area. I think more than 40 tons. Every day 5-6 tons were delivered. Now we made more than 55 humanitarian missions, main humanitarian missions during 2022, and every mission is not less than 5 tons of humanitarian. And now we are trying to make our missions not less than 8 tons of aid, and it's 1 or 2 missions every month, and only front lines of war.
He ended up becoming my godfather. I got baptised into the Ukraine Orthodox Church. My mum's a Catholic and my dad's a Presbyterian, so I never ended up being baptised. And while I was over there, I thought I am happy to go to some of these dangerous areas, but I am a Christian and I'd like to be baptised. And so I spoke to Artem and Father Vladimir and ended up being baptised into the Orthodox Church, and Artem stood in as my godfather. And since then, he's been a major asset to us, helping us to get permissions to go to areas in Ukraine.
Today we are supplying Donetsk region, Zaporizhzhia region, and Kharkivska region near front lines. We supplied people in areas where it's closed for any volunteers. It's very dangerous, but we are doing it.
Unfortunately, we live in a clickbait era. We live in the era of social media where everything's very fresh, very current, trends come and go very quickly. And that means actually with things like aid to Ukraine, people were really keen at the start because it was a trendy thing, it was the cultural thing, everyone was talking about it. And now it's not as trendy, it's not as cultural, less actors, less politicians are talking about Ukraine. There's a lapse of interest, the media moves on.
We have problems with donations to Ukraine. I don't know why, maybe it's vacation time, maybe Ukraine is not interesting. They think that war is something like on televisions. The war is not only on front lines. The war in Ukraine is everywhere. Civilians every day struggling to live normally.
That's why it's great the Telegraph does this series with us, because we keep Ukraine relevant, because it is very relevant for the people in Ukraine. Just because people aren't tweeting about it anymore doesn't mean the bombs aren't falling on people. And so it is becoming frustrating for Ukrainian groups because they're losing that Western support as people move on to other issues. And there are plenty of very good and worthwhile issues to support around the world, but the reality is the Ukraine war is happening now. And the people of Ukraine need our help.
What will happen next? Every day, air raids, when you with your little child sleeping in the bathroom and you hearing these bangs on the streets of Kiev. It's horror. Every day we don't know what will happen.
I think lots of people misunderstand what's happening in Ukraine, particularly around Kyiv. Images surfaced recently of a lot of people partying in Kyiv, and life seems as it was normal, as it was before the war. That's not the reality. A lot of people are going out and trying to live the lives they lived before the war. They perhaps are forgetting, it might be a bit of mental health, it might be a bit of a coping strategy. They're trying to act as if the war's not happening. And that sends a certain narrative around the world, but it's not the case. Kyiv's not safe. People are still dying on a weekly, if not daily basis. And while they do have a very good system which shoots down Russian drones, you're really turning a sniper rifle round into a shotgun blast. When the Patriot system shoots down these drones, they fragment into small pieces and they still smash windows, they smash buildings, and they do kill people. It's not a foolproof method of defense, and there is really no foolproof method of defense against that many incoming rocket attacks and drones on Kyiv. And it is hitting the Ukrainian people. They like to put on a strong facade, but when you do talk to them about it, they get emotional because they have to live with this day in, day out. A lot of them have brought their families back into Ukraine after they were initially evacuated, but that's more because of the morale, it's more because of the war effort. They want their family to help them rebuild their country. They want to pretend as if the war's not going on. But a lot of the soldiers in Ukraine, a lot of the people helping, their families are under a constant bombardment. We're there and we see how bad it is every time. It's non-stop shelling, it's non-stop rocket attacks pretty much everywhere in the country. But we're very fortunate. We get to leave, we get to go home at the end of the mission, where these people live it day in, day out. There's no escape for them. A lot of them can't leave the country and they're forced to endure this terror.